Okay. Oh, now it's working. Yay.
Yep.
That's good. So it's setting up your meeting, done, redirecting to YouTube. I think it worked. And there's even a chat there.
Yep, I can see you live on YouTube, so that worked.
Oh, that's great. Okay, well, that's good to know. So next time when we're doing our meetups, I'm going to do more of this live streaming stuff. That way people are happy to just view it later. I don't have to edit video and all that. Should save a lot of time. Does it actually work? Can you see?
Yeah, I saw the stream. It worked, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yep, I can see you live on YouTube, so that worked.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
It's actually really responsive.
That's really good. Okay. Well, that's fun. So we got, I guess we'll just admit all of these people. So we have our moderators, Vaughn, just in case there's any shenanigans, they'll be quickly punted out. And Steve, Rob, Andreas are all now admins. So I'm really happy about this link. That's really good. Oh, Vaughn, I see you're on the Miro board. Look at all the notes we've been taking over this meetup over the last year.
Oh, I see. So this is kind of a continuation.
Oh, yeah. This is a whole bunch of scribbles of different ideas that we use. Let me just put out the tweet that we're live.
Shall I help you admit some people?
Oh, no, don't worry about that. We got 3 capable bodies besides myself to take care of that. I only just gave you that admin in case you want to share something with people. You don't have to worry about getting permissions and unmuting and muting yourself and all that kind of stuff. That's better to just have it done that way. I'm going to wait about 5 minutes just to give some people a chance to get in. They might have issues signing in. I know we have a lot of people that join with the Zoom link, but we can also do the chat in the live stream on YouTube now as well. So we can field some questions, I guess, from both sides. Oh, wow. Yeah, 296. We have 296 signed up. So that's a lot.
I mean, if you do not necessarily want to actively participate and the Zoom meetup should be full, then at least it's also on YouTube. So
it is recorded on YouTube.
No, it's also live, so people could also join. Even
yeah, of course. Yeah, they can ask a question. So I guess Andreas and Steve and Rob, if you look at those comments, maybe I'll ask you guys to read an interesting question from someone. But yeah, so we got about 3 minutes to go, and I still didn't tweet this out. Where are we here? Oh, there we go. Do we tweet? Oh, great. Shouldn't have done that. Tweet with comment. There we go. Where minutes. All right. That's that. And about 2 minutes left. As people are jumping in, you can, oh, there's lots of JP Boodhoos in here. JP's a good guy. We did a really interesting session on automation with JP. He has done an incredible amount of work in automating his environment, and is one of the fastest people to code I've ever seen in my life. So if you want anything about automation and crazy keyboards, he's got about 32 level keyboards so that you can do all these modifiers. In the past, he had foot pedals to do the left and right mouse clicks and things like that even. So he's a man of taking things to the next level. We had a good chat with him, actually. Gosh, I guess JP was on earlier this year in the spring, and we had a chat for 2 to 3 hours, maybe even 4, and it's in our YouTube channel about just how he set up his system to do that. So yeah, I think we're going to be filled up to 100. So what we're going to do is to make sure that I already put a comment in the meetup that the YouTube link is live. So definitely make sure Bobby's in. Great. And then I'm not sure if people can raise their hands to be unmuted or chat to us. There's the chat. Moving to YouTube as I can cast it on TV. Yeah, exactly. Wow. I should have thought of this a long time ago. No wonder we have so few people that watch this, setting up Zoom and everything. All right, Vaughn, I think we're ready to go. We're 5 minutes in. We shouldn't delay people much longer. We do have 2 hours, although we don't need to use the entire 2 hours. It's really up to you and your time commitment. Sometimes when people are enthusiastic, we stay past the 2-hour mark as long as everyone's having a good time and getting value from the meetup. We do that, and later on, I tend to edit it down into usable chunks and put it on YouTube, so that people don't have to, basically sit through a 3-hour video. Although I think some of them I did not chop up and left them in their entirety. But lately I've been trying to do my best to make them digestible pieces, bite-sized pieces. And
and so like I can help draw some ideas or whatever that might help, but I'm here to learn like everybody else. So I have read some of your, I don't know if they're blog posts or something on
articles,
articles on event modeling website, and it pretty much makes sense to me. I don't know why anyone would sort of dislike it. It seems useful. I just haven't practiced with it, right? So I haven't actually used it. So I'm here to see how you actually drive a session or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, one of the going back to, I was really thinking about this over the last week or so, just to see how did I end up in this spot, and it's one of those things where I have to remind myself that I was never looking to create event modeling. I never wanted to say I need to have something that I'm an author of or I want to be an expert on or whatever. And through, I guess the sheer sort of drive to get more quality, do things faster or more efficiently, have less rework, have better communication, all of the things that are the really irritating and bad things in software, and especially at the enterprise level when you get into companies and you get the Dilbertisms and all that kind of stuff. It really rubbed me the wrong way because my background was, like most people that got into programming from their own interest, was programming on a Commodore 64 and just getting programs done, and maybe using some graph paper to make some plans as to how the screens for my little video game that I was going to make as a kid was going to work. It was really creative and a really positive feeling and a positive outlet of creativity. And at some point, there was a change when I went in the corporate world where there was a lot of negative feelings when I was working. And I wanted to have, I still enjoyed programming, the physical aspect of, typing down the program and orchestrating how the information flows and what people see, what happens when a button is pressed. All those things are still exciting, but planning those things and having someone tell you that's not okay, or this is not up to standard, or this is why you failed the interview, it kind of made me, scratch my head. Is this really how it's supposed to be? And there was an answer to that, obviously, from, I talked to the history of computing to Mel Conway quite a bit, and he gave me this background of, why waterfall is what it is. And his insight is that the people that designed the systems were a different team than the people that were implementing the systems, and that was basically for legal reasons, that you couldn't have someone set up an easy win by doing the design and then doing the implementation. So there's a bunch of contract kind of government level work, and I'm guessing it comes to the fact that only really rich companies or large companies could afford to automate their systems in the initial years. And so this aspect of waterfall came from that type of mindset in the corporate world. And there was a huge kickback, and there was we have something better, and it was agile. And of course, when I saw something better, I'm like, yes, okay, maybe that's why I'm feeling kind of bad here. There's all these quasi-scientific ways to architect and to do requirements, and now finally someone said enough of that, and we're just going to do agile, and we're going to have these little pieces of work and do that. But that kind of swung the pendulum to the other direction, where there was no design, and we're not going to do UML, and we're not going to do any of these things, and we're just going to allow the developers to do whatever it takes, but we're going to have these practices to keep it at a minimum so that we're not gold plating and all these other things. Sounds great. And I went ahead with that, and then again I got that same feeling again from the other side of the pendulum. And then I met Greg Young in 2007 and started to learn about the nature of information systems. I didn't realize what I was learning at the time, but it was a fresh look at event sourcing. Fresh look at information systems through the eyes of event sourcing, that, yeah, actually, we have this idea of a ledger that makes sense. Why are we throwing this information away? Years later, I realized that this is probably not as popular because third normal form had to exist for storage reasons, and we don't want to store that same address 3, 4, 5 times. Disks were expensive back then. And I used the canonical example of 1956, when I think it was 5 megabytes or something like that. A hard drive of 5 megabytes was a ton, weighed a ton, and cost $1 million or something like that, and cost $30,000 a month to operate. So yeah, if you tell your boss, we're going to have a ledger and you're going to need 5 of these instead of 1, they're going to tell you to take a hike.
When they hit PCs, we called them Winchester drives. That was like 84 maybe. My first Winchester drive was on a TI PC, which was IBM compatible. It ran DOS and stuff. But yeah, those machines were probably $5,000 or $6,000.
Yeah, they're expensive like heck. Like I remember even on my Amiga 2000, I didn't get a hard drive until much later, and I think the only friends that I had like a 5 megabyte hard drive, and they're gigantic, clunky. Yeah. They click to the side. So I think one of those things, like I go into this a bit in my writing, is that we have Moore's law for processing power, but we rarely looked at it from the perspective of storage. And I think that answers some of how we got to OO and how we store state about those abstractions in their software, so that when we turn the computer back on, the customer has the right status and all of those things. And so in 2008, back to my story, 2007, 2008, I met Greg in 2007. 2008, we kind of really started hanging out nearly every day trading these ideas about event sourcing. And I think that's around the time when he really coined the acronym CQRS. At that time, I really got into it in terms of like, how do we make this more accessible? How do we solve some of these other problems? I was lucky enough to contribute a little bit by just saying, some of these consensus algorithms could be helpful, and helped introduce Paxos to the whole thing, which was already being done on other sides of concurrent and distributed programming, but not specifically in the CQRS circles yet. So that was kind of fun to be able to contribute a little bit to the whole effort, which was really good. And then as I continued to apply this, I saw what an uphill battle it is to actually consult and drive try and drive the industry forward by putting fresh ideas on the table and getting companies to act more responsibly and making everyone more happy in their day-to-day work, and get more collaboration and all that. And of course, that came along with domain-driven design, because those event sourcing and CQRS circles tended to gather around Eric Evans and Martin Fowler and all those folks. So QCon and other conferences, they were the first places where you would see topics on event sourcing and related practices and ideas. So that's kind of the background of where the event sourcing part came from. But then I saw that if we are going to write, I basically said this is the best way to write software. I just loved the fact that we had a breadcrumb trail to see how we got to someplace. That breadcrumb trail was really missing, and answered a lot of problems, a mountain of problems for what I've encountered in enterprise software. And I'm going to switch the use of the word enterprise software development, because I'm going to drop the software development. I'm going to start talking about automating information systems, big and small. I think the software development piece, people get caught on, and they start to think about algorithms and sorting binary trees and all of these things. Yet most of the jobs out there that people do, 90% of them, are really moving information from left to right. Someone fills in a form, it gets stored somewhere, and some of that information makes it to system A, some of it makes it to system B, and might get transformed a little bit. It's really not that interesting, to be honest, right? A lot of the enterprise stuff is really automating forms, what people did with pen and paper before digitization, and departments with little trolley carts where things got put into the next department, the fuchsia copy goes here, etc., all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the insights that Greg had, is that just imagine what you would do in a system if this was still pen and paper, to answer any kind of problematic questions that would come up about information systems and how we design them. So what would you do with pen and paper? And you had departments, and these weren't computers, these were people, and these weren't data sets, they were forms, or a file folder that had to go over to another department. So that really helped kind of go and see that this is only the last 50 years, and humanity's existed for a really long time, and we built incredible civilizations without a microchip quite successfully. So we're quite capable as humans. So taking a fresh look, let's look at what we have at our disposal with modern computers, where we can have in our phone probably the equivalent of a multinational company from the 50s in terms of automation, right? That's Moore's law, etc. That's where we got to. So let's take a fresh look at automating this and try and clear away any distractions and look at it from a fresh perspective. So that's one of. Sorry, go ahead.
May I interject just a couple of
absolutely.
comments?
Anytime, yeah.
So I think we probably almost met 10 or 11 years ago. And here's why. Because Greg got in contact with me and invited me to an event sourcing workshop he was going to do in Vancouver. Thinking, do you remember this?
Of course.
And I
mean, there's a lot.
I think you were going to sponsor it. So literally, I took time away from my client and flew up to Vancouver to meet with him, in this workshop or whatever training he was going to do. And then he decided not to show. So I sat. So I think he was instead in Montreal. And so I sat in my hotel.
Yes.
Yeah. July, I think, right?
Yeah.
So I sat in my hotel room for large parts of 2 days and
Oh, no.
watched through whatever medium he used at the time. For maybe it was like, I don't know, anyway, it doesn't
I
even
forget
matter.
what we used back then.
You're right. But anyway, so I probably would have met you, like 10 and a half years ago.
Yep.
Had he flown from Montreal to Vancouver.
Yeah.
But instead I got to see, like we went, I brought my family with me and we got to walk through, what's the big garden there?
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, the largest one is Stanley Park.
Stanley
is
Park,
really
yeah.
large.
So we walked all over Stanley Park, had some great, Asian food and stuff like that. So anyway, so we probably could have met back then, but and then and the other thing I wanted to say is, for quite a long time, I have been saying that code is an obstacle to the product. Right?
That's very good. Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's been at least 30 years I've been saying that. So I have been very much into the idea of, model-driven architecture and model-driven development and so forth. And I just think that those things were a bit premature. That, for example, Rational, right? Rational was trying to do that with UML, and I got really excited when I heard of their, what's it called, Extreme XDE, Extreme Development Environment, and I got that. I actually I got access to that really early. In fact, where I was working in Boulder, Colorado, was right across the parking lot from one of the Rational offices, and the guy that was working on that, a Polish guy, Wojtek.
Where are all these Polish people coming from in your history?
Wojtek Kozaczynski. I don't know whatever happened to the guy. Super nice. In fact, he was the one who told me about the Denver, Polish community that would get together and like create pierogies and things like that on a certain day of the week. And anyway, very nice guy. I wish I knew where he ended up after IBM acquired Rational. But so I was sort of really looking forward to being more in that world. And then it just sort of, like you said, it just kind of, went flat. Part of the problem was Rational Rose was expensive. Mm-hmm. And all the model-driven architecture stuff was also expensive and also very much targeted at certain industries. So there were some plugins or whatever for telecommunications, but for whatever I was working on, forget it. You had to implement it yourself.
Right.
And so I think there was that sort of barrier, but the other barrier is software developers love to tinker, right? I mean, that's what sort of programming is all about. So we love to tinker, and what people have tried to do with Agile is say, okay, you can still tinker, but test your tinkering, right?
You're right.
and make sure you don't break it. And just in case you want to write all this code that you aren't certain really matters very much, just don't do that yet, because wait until you know that it matters. And just, ideas like that. But Alan Kay said some time ago, maybe 20 years ago, he said that the programming languages of today will be the object code of tomorrow, right?
Right.
In other words, he's saying continue to build on top of the languages, but we're going to create new languages on top of those languages, and those mainly start to happen because we are taking higher and higher levels of abstraction. Mm-hmm. But programmers don't like that, right? It takes their tinkering away from them. But I think that there will be a time when we won't have a choice, because designing and, it will be the craft, so to speak, right? Of high productivity and designing visually. And, by the way, Mel Conway still works on a visual modeling tool.
That's right.
He created, he runs Smalltalk in a Windows VM on a Macintosh on, I think it's Windows 95, right? And
Yep.
he's still, right? And so he still thinks that this is feasible, viable, but still nobody really listens to him. I listened to him, and he wanted to do some work together, but you know, anyway, I won't go into that, but it didn't work out. I would have loved to work with them on.
Oh no, I have the same exact conversations with him. So he attended a workshop with me and Greg in the Boston area, and I've been in contact with him many times and looked at his. It's actually very close. The only thing that event modeling really is different is that it doesn't get into the specific details. So I can cut to the chase of what event modeling is and it isn't. It really, because it ties it nicely together that we talked about Mel as well and all of these case tools and whatnot and modeling tools. What we decided to say is that because we like to tinker, we don't specify the how we can get from state A to state B. We just have to say that the system exists in state A and then state B after this one tick of the clock. And we make sure that each tick of the clock can only have one operation. Even if things are happening in parallel, we show by example and we say, this is what was the truth at this time. And when we move the clock forward one tick, this is the next piece of truth that we have to have. And what we call these things are slices of the workflow. And basically event modeling has 4 patterns, and it's about state change, state view, and then integration between separate systems or automation and translation. 2 other, there kind of plays on the first 2. So the reason that there's only 2 is because there is a problem when we have too many patterns. And you say, hey, here, read the Fowler series of books, and also read Vaughn's book, and then read Eric Evans' book, and then have everyone do that. It's going to be quite a long time before you have your whole organization on the same page to use these patterns and this language to do that. So my reaction was over the decades that we're trying to do too much in terms of where we can go for information, and that allows people to go off into their own areas of interest and lose the cohesion of the communication, especially between departments. And yeah, hold on a second. Sorry, my son was just fidgeting with some of my camera stuff. He's got an assignment, I'm sure. So he's like right next to my on my right in the cupboard, and I'm trying to concentrate to think what I'm going to say next, and he's fidgeting. But anyway, working from home and COVID, right? So hopefully that'll all end. But anyway, where was I? So yeah, the idea that simplicity is what we need to have. And you already talked about all the modeling tools and rationals, and they're expensive, they're large, they're opinionated. And then there may be yet another methodology from someone else, etc. So the amount of knowledge that one is bombarded with is almost insurmountable if you're going to be able to communicate with every single person in your organization. So one of the driving factors behind event modeling, before I even wanted to build event modeling, is that no, I want to get going with the business owners, the product owners, the developers, the testers, without having to learn their tools or for them to have to learn my tools. I want to build a common place for all to kind of do that. So I had some restrictions. I could not use technical terms. I could not use fancy new names. Or if I was going to use fancy new names, I had to find the fewest amount. That's why we only have 4 patterns and 4 moving pieces. We don't want any more than that. We can, as you said, elaborate on those to create parts of or entirely recognizable patterns that we might have in the Gang of 4 book or anywhere else. And that's fine. But I don't want to have to explain to my CEO what a decorator pattern is, or what a visitor pattern is, or what a factory is. I do not want to have that as the obstacle to overcome to have good communication. Yet, I don't want the reverse problem either of going from a business person using some language about their KPIs or whatever that the nerdy guy doesn't want to learn or be interested in. So
Yeah,
it's a tough thing to do, and it's also a large thing to to encompass. So it also can't be onerous. It can't be like UML, because if you look at this sideways, I'm going to share my screen quickly.
Just to interject one more thing too,
Sure.
what software developers haven't, I mean, by and large figured out, is that users, customers, whatever you want to call it, they don't care about architecture. They don't care about programming languages.
Right.
They don't even care about features.
Right.
What they care about are outcomes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right?
And this is what we're doing. I'm going to quickly make sure I don't have any personal passwords on my screen, but I will share my screen and just guide you through the giant link that I sent with way too many things on that Miro board. But as I said, it's a gathering of a multitude of ideas, and maybe when I walk you through a couple of areas, maybe you can have some questions for me, and just to clear it up as to why did you do that, or why did you not do something else, and things like that. I think that might help. And we're in a very good. I'm quite happy about this, because you're looking at this for the first time, which is great, because there's so many people like you that are doing that. But at the same time, you have the level of experience with DDD and other concepts that other people still want to attain. So it's going to be a really nice bridge for them in understanding for why you're asking a certain question, that they can now have faith that that came from an understanding of these other things that they're going to learn anyway. So let's see if I can share my screen here, and hopefully I can stop sharing properly after. I've had some Zoom issues before, but here we go. I hope everyone can see that. And yeah, so this is our Miro board that we use, and our example that we use all the time is this time tracking application. For this purpose, we also in the articles use a hotel management system. So like you said before, the how doesn't matter. When someone clicks this button to log their time, there's an implicit command or explicit command. It doesn't matter how you implement it, but there's this event that happens, and we store that event, that this is actually on the ledger, that this person actually did go in and started to and basically did an hour of work for Walmart. It's their client, and that updated the screen here. So you can see it's by example with actual data when you're doing this to the fullest extent. And
I think your screen share may have just unshared, or it did for me anyway.
It still says I'm sharing, so I'm hoping that the other guys can confirm whether they're still
I can see your screen. You're sharing your whole screen, not just the window, but I can see it.
Okay, yeah, that's I know I've had some issues when I'm just sharing one window, so I just by default share the whole screen. Thanks, Rick. And yeah, so let me see. Vaughn, can you still not see anything?
Correct.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to start again just to see if that works. And share screen. Here we go. Okay, how's that? Is that working again?
Good again.
Okay, let me know if, just interrupt me if it disappears again. It might be the notifications from people trying to join that is screwing up the screen sharing. But as you can see, you have two
unshared again.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna have to try and get rid of these notifications because people are trying to.
Now it's back.
It's still sharing.
Yeah, I think what's happening is that Zoom gets interrupted by.
Okay.
It might be.
Yeah. In fact, it's on a virtual display for me. Sorry,
full screen mode. It's when it switches.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you switch to presentation, it goes to full screen, and on some multi-monitor setups, it goes to a different
what
monitor.
I'm seeing on my screen is people. I get a notification here for people joining the Zoom call.
Probably everybody else should be.
When it goes.
So Adam, you're still sharing fine. The
Yep.
notifications aren't bothering us. What happens is when you switch to sharing, for
Yep.
many people, it switches to full screen.
Oh, I see.
And if you have virtual monitors, sometimes that pops up on a different monitor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, mine went to a different monitor, but I'm going to suggest that maybe it's because others should mute, because I think it's taking the focus back to the
Oh, okay.
window.
So yeah, if the admins can mute others, that shouldn't be interrupting or not talking at this time. Hopefully that'll make things a lot smoother. Thank you. Okay, so Vaughn, you can see things now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And, Adam, one comment. It seems you're sharing on a very high resolution, 4K.
I will zoom in. Yes.
Might be unreadable for.
Yeah, I'm going to
resolution.
zoom right in.
Cool.
That's correct. I will zoom right in.
Why
to
not
these
just
things.
maximize your browser? So we
Yes,
can use
that
the
could-
whole real
The
estate.
reason is I think I had some issues with sharing before.
That looks
so
great.
I'm hesitant, but hopefully that'll work. All right. So this is someone's workflow for adding hours and things like that. You notice that we add these slices. One of the most powerful things about event modeling is finding a granular sort of building block of information systems that will give you a velocity. And let's say you're working on a mobile application or a web application. That stack is fairly consistent in terms of whether you're going to have an API with following REST principles or whatever you're going to have. What you want is this idea of cadence where you're copy pasting one projection or one command handler to start the next one. You're really not going to be doing any real experimentation as you're doing more and more workflow steps as you keep going. And this is one of the biggest benefits of doing event modeling. And it seems to work for a number of reasons. One of them is that you're getting small design up front. So you're getting a reservation of space for where you're going to have this information, i.e. tables that are going to have the projections, etc. So it actually does extend to traditional systems where we actually had that. And so if I go to a traditional system, where do we have those? I'm just going to zoom out. So I will zoom back in. I know it's tiny. I just don't know where I have those notes somewhere. Yes. So from our workshop exercises, we're doing this in traditional systems where we sort of store, we start to track what tables are getting inserted into and selected from, and this is quite useful because in a traditional system it can show you your coupling, right, which is done by the state, which is not just coupling in code, it's actually code, the actual information that's responsible for the coupling regardless of the code you can show here for a traditional application. Now events still happen in the traditional system, we just don't store them, right? When I register something, I have this expectation in my head that I actually did this step, and that is an event in my head. And that's part of the story that I remember of interacting with the system. The actual implementation and the design of the system is traditional. We're doing Ruby on Rails with a large canonical model and all the problems that come out of that, of course. But at least what we can do is we can show that coupling across a timeline of using the system where we're going to have an updated email, etc. So that's one of the ways that that event modeling allows you to eliminate rework. And rework is really a lot about having to revisit through agile application. Just the YAGNI, you're not going to need it until you are. So in one of the articles, I use an example of registration and then adding the email verifier with a code. So you start to, you need to add another column to that table to store the verification code that you're going to have to enter when you click on the verify email. That's going to get emailed out. So that forces you to go back and look at another piece of code you wrote before. And that starts to have this buildup of cyclomatic complexity and other things where your features are going to be way more costly if you do them later on in the project. But what we want is the same experience as we have when we're building a house, that if you're building a a desktop counter or a sink or installing a sink, it's not going to be any different amount of effort depending if you choose to do something else before it or not. So we start to have some planning as to where information is going to sit and where we can reduce that revisiting. And so this is kind of a way of looking at open close principle to be adhered a little bit better in our efforts, where if we're done with a certain part of the workflow, because we know how that information is going to get used later on and that we actually have it stored and all the opinions about it, we can actually go and look at where that information is going to be used, the fact that we have it. We don't have to go back and start to make adjustments in something that we already finished. So that's quite good. The other thing about this slice method is that it allows us to do polyglot development, meaning that if I have abstracted away our state, this is probably more to do with event sourcing than really looking at event modeling specifically. But if you combine event sourcing with event modeling, you get the best of both worlds, and you can have some storage of your events, and then you can have a very serverless kind of approach to how you do your command handlers and projections. Some of the things that you do share, maybe views for like menus, you don't want to redo those twice, but each command and each read model can be done in their individual stacks. So you have, for example, all the user stuff is done in .NET on port 30. There's another one for tracking time done on port 3001. That's Linux, .NET on Linux. And then you have Golang on port 302. But if you notice, there's a user register stuck into the tracking part, which is a no-no. But why? Maybe we don't have any more .NET people anymore, and we needed to change the user registration piece. We can re-implement that slice using Golang, and it'll still work, even though our initial efforts for user stuff was done here. That assumes something. That assumes that we are not going to be maintaining code. We're going to be wholeheartedly replacing slices. We're rarely going to be going in and on purpose violating open close principle by changing something. If the design changes, we incur a cost to redo that slice. Just like it's a drywall, and you put a dent in it, and you're just going to have to replace that drywall when you're building the house. You're not going to go and patch it up. It's no longer a new house. It's going to not be as nice. So does that kind of make sense from this perspective of how we do things? We first of all we only move from left to right by example. If you already read some of the other articles, the permutations of a particular command handler, for example, can be done with these given when thens. We can do the same thing for building up a scenario for a couple of different view models or projections with real data, so that we can say that these are the permutations of data. They don't necessarily change the workflow, but the calculations are different, and we can show those. If there's really large workflow changes for the SAD path, we generally put them all the way to the right and start a new workflow and cross-reference it back to where the bad things happened in the middle. So that's how we do that. Again, this leans on our human mind to be able to fill in the blanks effectively, because the permutations, we can't afford to specify everything by example. There's just too many permutations of what can happen. So we need to trust our brains to fill in the blanks, and we can specify only the red arrows in terms of our permutations, and trust our brains to understand what all the other permutations will have. Now, that seems like a requirement of the technical side to do that, but it's also a requirement of the requirement side, the business side, because they're making the same assumptions anyway, but they hold us, the technical people, to a higher standard that you must have all of these things specified to the nth degree, where their requirements are rarely so, or at least they're not integrated to the level that they actually make sense together. So that's kind of the gist of event modeling. This is how we start projects. We go with what the mockups are going to have in terms of what the user experience is. We have example users as the swim lanes at the top, and we have our domains and subsystems. Depending if we want to use domain-driven design terms, we use subsystem or domain, and bounded context or some other term, depending on the organization and how familiar they are with DDD. But if no one's familiar with DDD, we can start to use some of these concepts from DDD with normal everyday terms, such as a subsystem. Everyone knows that there's a subsystem. Hey, we have a payment subsystem and we have an inventory subsystem. That makes sense. So that's what we're going to have for basically dealing with concepts from domain-driven design and other ports and adapters and all these other things, to basically have a regular English or whatever your natural language is to explain all those concepts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think the same ways mostly. I do like to think in slices, and I guess moving across a timeline. To me, it doesn't really matter whether you draw more, vertically or horizontally, or a bit of both.
Yeah, it's a sequence diagram, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think that like with event storming, I tend to use vertical space for parallel, things that happen simultaneously, or in a like fork join workflow or something like that. But anyway, I mean it doesn't, to me, that's not so important. It's just a matter of finding a way to communicate where everybody understands, what we're doing. I think the thing that I see with your model is that you do give quite a bit of attention to the UI, as in even, details of layout. Where I might differ in that is with event storming. If I have a UI that I want to communicate about, I put a green sticky up, and I just maybe do some bullet points on the major pieces of data that view needs to present. And I don't know that there's, like a big advantage or disadvantage to either one of those. But what I try to caution when I teach event sourcing is to purposely not drive the modeling session by means of the UI. And I've seen that, but and I'm not saying that what you're doing is in any way incorrect from my opinion. It's just that what I see is when people start doing that, they go into this sort of minutia of, the user now clicks a button, and and that becomes the model, which is really truly not the model, right? I mean, those details. So, I mean, some of those are perfectly implicit. There's no doubt that those things need to happen.
Yeah, you can see, and I can just share my screen one more time, because we have, let's see, there we go, share.
But this is where we
sometimes we have placeholders for, can you see it now? Sorry, Andreas.
I just want to say this is where we always try to be agnostic of such details as click a button, but always express it in a more general way that describes the business process. So that UI could be just one solution of more. Always should always be possible to have a solution with humans and pen and paper, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, go ahead.
I'd actually like to add. Oh, go ahead, Vern.
What was I going to say? So yeah. I don't, it's not, like I said, it's not that I think that driving from the UI is incorrect. It's just that what I see when developers are using event storming and they start modeling that way, that they go into far too much detail at that level. And so I would just, in general say, no, don't do that. And that's why I say take a step up and go into sort of big picture, what's called big picture storming, and just worry more about the events, right? And show the views that are sort of indisposable, like the ones that just, you absolutely cannot forget to do this. And so the green sticky becomes more of a note that says, we really need to make sure we have this data available for that.
Yeah. And so we've done that with sort of the strategic, the zoom out. If I zoom out of my, we talked about this in the last few talks. If we zoom out on an event model, and with certain tools like ONote, where we start to automate this kind of stuff so that things disappear that are not relevant, we do have this, but we still have some reference screens, because we want to say that even if we're looking at a strategy for what we're going to be doing on the roadmap, I want to show, this is like a digital wallet. Let's say someone's doing some crypto payments or whatever. We want to still show by example that someone has this receipt that was paid in, Bitcoin or whatever they're using, and that they entered through some sort of cryptocurrency portal, and that they were able to do so at Walmart, for example. That's our goal. So we still have that at the very large level. What we have here is a few key events with some reference data to show those things happening. As we zoom in, we actually get into the minutia, the detail that we do want. Actually, at some point, we do want the specifications to say that, well, what is it on this screen that we're going to have? And I should qualify that these slices include UI rework, because that is something that is more fluid. So when we cost out each slice, 1/3 of it is for state and 2/3 of it is for UI on average. And that's the velocity for our teams working on typical solutions, where we have usually the first one's more of a wireframe, the blue links and black text on white kind of web page to just get the system working. Then you have your first application of the design work and all of that stuff. And then once you see the whole thing working, there may be more refinements to make sure that the whole experience looks pretty good. So there's generally 2 main rewrites included as part of the costing of each of these slices. So that's kind of where we come from. But the reason that we want the UI UX is because it's been always put on the tail end of that. And so when we want, I understand what you're saying is that, if you're doing this with developers, you're going to start to fidget with this looks better. I want the drop down here instead of a radio button and all this kind of stuff, right? And get fancy. Don't want to get into that minutia right away. But at the same time, half the people are visual and half the people are analytical, regardless if you're a programmer or a business person. And so what we want is to answer both. And sometimes we start entirely with just events. Just say, give me a storyline. In fact, that's kind of like what the 7 steps are that we kind of put in the original article, is just, do we have a storyline here? Do these events make sense to go over a timeline and do exactly this? But we specifically don't do branching. We want a story. We don't want a graph. Graphs are not easily remembered by people, and that inhibits communication. So that's one of the reasons that we don't have any branching. Because you see 2 arrows here, that doesn't necessarily mean branching. It actually means that you're using this information somewhere else in another report, or it's a report that's added. Actually, this one probably doesn't need to be here. Oops.
So I'd like to maybe
wait. Let's leave all the questions for the audience until the end. We're just going to let Vaughn express everything he wants to express, so that otherwise we'll never get out of here.
Well, actually, I was actually wanted to point out one thing about he was talking about big picture and stuff like that, and event storming. And for Vaughn and other people, it's important to recognize that event storming is much more of a rule-based thinking, and event modeling is much more example-based, and brass tacks, more rubber meets the road. So if you're jumping up and say, what is our business process and how should our business work? And you don't know how your business is supposed to work, you might pop up to that big picture and say, okay, but when you're actually saying, now, okay, let's brass tacks. Let's make sure that really works. That's where the example base shines. So you can see there's different reasons.
That's a really good point, Rick. And I actually elaborated a little bit more on this in person than the meetups lately. So we haven't had a full meetup for about a couple of weeks because it's been pretty hectic with workshops, etc. But a lot of the talk that we have in our modeling exercises, I'm just going to stop sharing for now. A lot of the talk that we have in modeling workshops and exercises is abstractions and key ideas, and things like that are good. But the flip side is that if we use information and no abstractions instead and examples, we get, like Rick said, the brass tacks of, I really don't care if you use the pattern here or if you're going to use this screen. At this point in time, this is the information that exists in the system, and it's shaped this way. And when someone looks at the screen, that's presented this way. And if you think that this should be an inheritance in the object model for, a dog is an animal or whatever you're going to do, it is irrelevant. The person has seen this information at this time, and they're making their decision to click that next button or do the next action based on that information. So there are key differences in terms of what we rely on in event modeling versus what we rely on in event storming and domain driven design and other modeling exercises where it's more abstract. We actually want to use the information itself without any extra decoration. So that we can say that there's no argument and no subjectivity as to what that information is at what time in the course of using this. So it has to be it's kind of ruthless, and it says, oh, this is getting really wide and long. And I showed some of the shortcuts already to make sure that it's not too wide in terms of that, but it's exhausting because it's real work. People say, oh, I thought it was going to give me all these answers for free. And no, the work still has to be done. We're just using real information.
Yeah. In fact, I acknowledge, Rick's point that he was making about concrete and examples and so forth. But I would say that is true of the design level storming and event storming. It may not naturally be as concrete, but it definitely is concrete. So I'm not here to defend event storming in any way or to promote it or whatever. I'm just saying that yes, big picture storming is very much about what are we supposed to do? Where is the core value, right? So in DDD terms, where are the core domain areas of this big picture, right? And you kind of have to understand a lot of, or pretty much the whole process to understand where are we going to focus our experimentation and like really core development. And then now you can use design level storming both for core and even for supporting subdomains and so forth. But I just probably where you're starting with event modeling, awesome, right? Very good. But you probably, I think like Rick said, is you already sort of understand where the core is. And then it's interesting that it seems like the broader, the bigger picture part that you showed all the yellow together, and I don't want to state this as definite, but is that sort of an after thought? Like, in other words, okay, now let's summarize this into this.
No, it can be either or. So the idea behind event modeling is for it to be a blueprint when you're building and for it to be a map for when you're maintaining and using the system. So it is also used at the very beginning to draw ideas from. So just like the first step is to brainstorm all of that. And we still do that, and we still want to gather things into common areas, but we quickly want to drop to reality because sometimes our abstractions and our core models are maybe not based in reality. Maybe it sounds good, but it's hard to develop and it's going to give us problems. So we want to have a bridge from the conceptual to the actual concrete. And I often make this this sort of generalization for what we're doing is that Rick and I always debate about problem space, solution space. And my answer to him seems to be most of the time is that, well, I am exploring the problem space. I'm just using a lot of solution examples.
Well, and in fact, last night I was drawing, the first storming that I did was actually very example based on a specific product that we're working on. And I didn't even bother with big picture because we already know the vision, and there aren't a lot of moving parts, but there's a lot of detail in the examples themselves, right? So I didn't even bother trying to big picture this model because we already understand well what we're doing, but what we need are more examples. So yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of where I guess a lot of my background comes in, from building systems and having that, helping companies bridge. How do we start implementing? Because I think with the previous modeling exercises, UML or anything, even before we were doing any of this, there are a lot of helpful things to do that, but there was never the bridge to how it's going to get implemented. We did some functional point analysis in the early 2000s, if you remember, which was kind of but it didn't actually have a proper anchor, which I feel is state. I think the one thing that, and that's why in my second article on that website, I talk about Fred Brooks, and he says, show me all these wonderful flow charts and all of these things, and I'll continue to be mystified. Show me your tables and I'll know exactly what your system does. If he was working in these days, he's like retired, he's 90 years old now, but if he was still working today and he had access to the storage, to have ledger, to have a trail, to have a storyline, I think that statement would be times 10, right? So I see taking Fred Brooks' statement from the 60s as, you're right, and you were so right, and we can do so much better with that insight to hang on to what people can agree is the truth and leave as few things to be subjective as possible, because that'll help with all sorts of problems in the industry. Well, this person's my boss, so their opinion about whether there should be a factory or this, or whether this lives in this domain or that domain, they're telling me to do it. So okay. Whereas when you're looking at the data and where it will live, and you're standing shoulder to shoulder with everyone, collaboratively looking like, that swim lane looks empty. Why do we even have it? It just starts to look at that like in those kinds of terms.
Yeah, and maybe the people that you're working with are already quite good at sort of visualizing their innovations, right? And whereas a lot of times I'll go into a Fortune company and they really literally, they're just like, what do we do now?
Yeah, no, that's pretty similar. I mean, I think we do that for projects great and small. I think the problem is just at different scales, but it's the same problem. It's like, where do I start? How much is it going to cost? Can I do estimations? Will I get a velocity sooner? Can I subcontract this? Is there a way to fix price this thing at all or not? Is this all experiments? Do we use our stack the same way throughout everything that we want to do? The event model is supposed to answer those things, right? We go through to as much as possible. We have our own shorthand internally for event modeling. Like, we don't bother with a lot of the arrows. Our core thing is saying, how many command handlers do we have? And how many projections of state do we have? So in other words, how many different state changes, possible types of state changes that we have, and how many possible views into that state we have? Those are the best anchors for sizing projects. And when we're talking about how much is this going to cost when we've designed it, I want to have an answer. And for the first time, I feel like I'm closer to building a house in software than ever before in my career. because we can have those discussions. And even after, and a lot of people put two together, right? A lot of people say we always do event storming first, and we move to, and we take those events and we move them into an event model, and then we have our screens there, and we just continually update that. Yeah, like you're right. We don't want to get distracted with all the buttons at the beginning, but we have a place for it. And you know what? Before we start, we actually get the designers to work with the developers to make sure that it looks nice, and they have a canvas that they're working on together, so that when the app is published, it's a collaborative effort. It wasn't a services-based department called design that we threw something over the wall. Sounds familiar, right? And got something back, right? We did that with QA. We did that. There's a lot of these silos that happened in the industry, but event modeling is supposed to be the blueprint at a work site where it just rolls out, and the plumber and the electrician know that they're working on these things at these times, and that this is how those things are going to connect, right? And at some points they do connect. The garburator, right? It's part plumbing, part electrical. So they're going to have to make sure that they can tell the boss when the garburator is going to be ready, because it's two separate subsystems that need to work together. We want that same chart as to where we're going. We want that same map as to, once we built stuff, to say, where can we add on these extra features? Do we have a solarium that we want to add to the house? Well, where can we attach that? Where are the studs in the walls, so that we can make sure that this is, this won't fall apart when the wind blows? All those things we have blueprints for, so we can answer those questions, right? And so
yeah, that's great stuff. That's
yeah, it's really having something concrete. I do like the fact that the same canvas can be used for event storming and other things. And I think the initial message from storming that was kind of disheartening is that it was a day exercise, and the communication was the number one thing that we got out of it, and everything got crumpled and thrown away. It's like, oh, what a missed opportunity. Why don't we use those things? We had such a great insight. Those are really good anchors for going forward. Let's not agile this too much, and let's keep some of those artifacts and base the results of that really fruitful, amazing collaboration as a spine and a backbone to how we're going to continue to work over this. And when everyone says, why is that? Oh, remember, that was when we talked about that. Is that still true? Oh yeah, you're right. It is still true. Let's keep going. End of problem, instead of 10 meetings. Right?
Yeah. By the way, I helped myself to admit Christian Dega.
Oh yeah. I've just been clicking people in
because he was probably late because he had to ride his bicycle home from the office. Are you still there, Christian?
Yeah, no, I've been letting people in. I think we have like 50 on YouTube watching. So, 42 right now. So it's worked out. We had a barrage of people sign up, and I'm happy that everyone's able to tune in and all that. So I totally get it. We have this conversation, I think. Rick, would you say it's maybe once a month at least, the problem space, solution space? Let's not get into the weeds. Let's talk.
Yeah,
let's take a step back. We keep going back to this.
Taking a step back and realizing, as Adam points out, which he forgets to say sometimes, is when you're dealing with high uncertainty about what you're trying to accomplish, then event modeling on how does what you're trying to do map to reality isn't going to be event modeling isn't going to be your answer. It's like, figure out what you're trying to accomplish. What's your business, right? If you're like, which way should our business go? Should we tackle this product or this product? Then event modeling and how I implement that and how does that map to implementation isn't going to be your answer. Get that sorted first with something. And there are additions Adam's exploring to how it maps to event modeling. But the main thing that when Adam put it, it's a blueprint, but it's not a technical architecture blueprint. It's an information architecture blueprint, and that's a key difference. It's a view of you're able to look at it and analyze information completeness. If I want to have a view and a screen that shows this state, well, what events, reality, like, well, how did it ever get in that state? What has to have happened? And you have to see that, and it, with if you actually look, maybe Adam, you can show and talk about that sine curve.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to do something that sine curve, it doesn't come back out, then you're missing something. Like those things that should go down, and that there should be a view connecting to some event, right? And if you don't see that sine curve of stuff, then you've got holes in your information architecture. It stands out. So that's the key thing.
Yeah.
You're not complete here yet because you can't see the sine curve.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Rick. It's there's so many things to cover because we've built up quite a knowledge base of these insights, and so one of them is this harmony. This things go in and things go out, and when you stretch that over time, it makes that nice harmonic sine wave, as you can sort of see through this diagram. As we get information out, we have some automation, maybe we have some screens, but then there's something else that gets hit, and information goes back in. It keeps going like music. When you zoom out on this, it really looks like a harmony. And someone had an insight to this, that it really, your system has a harmony. It's unique to that system, and it's kind of like a fingerprint based on, everyone has a different fingerprint, but I'd say that most people's fingerprints are the same width, and they take the same kind of curves. This is the same kind of insight that we're doing here, is that yes, every solution is a snowflake, but all snowflakes are made out of water, and that molecule is H2O. And that's what we're after here, is getting that granularity so that we have those pieces to move. And when we actually get to specifying something, it's not too large, not too small. If it's too small, it's not useful. You might as well just be writing English terms and just do regular requirements. Here, what we have is that the basic level of abstraction that will work for any information system. That's what we're after, and not too basic, so it's still useful. And so it's really about this harmony going across the time. As we continue to look across, we have notes that we hit on all of these different things that are happening, and we can see, once people have used an event model for a long time, for a lot of our clients, they're familiar with what areas are after what, and they're quite happy to select a large portion of that and say, I need to add some things here. Let me move that over, right? And do this extra few steps in here. And the tooling like ONote that Bobby is developing is really automating this stuff, so that you can hit some quick keys inside the browser and actually get these things typed up a lot quicker, and they'll fold and expand as you need. But the idea is that you're kind of dealing with a music sheet of, a musician knows what to do because they're familiar with the pattern going across. They know what they have to do to their instrument to make that tune, to make that song happen. And so do the rest of the people in the orchestra. So we have the same thing for information systems. When we have the developers, the product owners, all the different musicians in our organization looking at the sheet music, they know what they're talking about. They know which parts of the symphony they're talking about, because your business is going to change, but you're still in the same business. So that model of the whole information system should be something that you go back to and collaborate over and over with. So I like that analogy of the sheet music, because whenever I look at these event models, I have some really good examples for you that I can show you another time of real projects where they're quite large. There's a trading company that is quite large that event modeling has helped rewrite their entire platform, moving it from Windows-based software to a web-based piece of software. That's quite complex because it's trades on the New York Stock Exchange and the Chicago Board of Exchange, and all sorts of things like not just that, but insurance and all sorts of things. So anyway, there's quite a complex system, and they broke Miro because there was too many things. But it helped them so much, they just split it off into 3 separate Miro boards because it was such a large workflow. There's 300 fields for the New York Stock Exchange trade when you create an order for wanting to do a trade on the New York Stock Exchange. But that information completeness that Rick said was so important, because for the first time, and they tried a lot of stuff. They tried DDD, they tried UML, they tried RUP, they tried all bunch of stuff, and they never had quite the success with what do we do next when they actually saw all the information and did that information completeness check and had a way of looking at architecture from the information perspective, like Rick said. It was incredibly powerful for them, because then they could isolate each state transition. They could actually talk about how large the project is. They could actually talk about how far they've got along with the project, not just from a bunch of tickets in Jira, but actually from saying this part works. You know, they can point to the blueprint, say this whole thing is done and this is what it spits out, and that's a good contract, right? Those contracts are even better ways to specify APIs. They're like they give you the context of when they're used. So as I draw a red line, I think I have this as an example here somewhere.
Yeah, I just hope I can find time to try this. I'd like to try it.
Well, you're invited to try it with us at any point.
Okay.
You know, you're more than welcome to either do that with us in private with other projects or in public at the meet. You know, this meetup happens most of the time twice a week. I've been extremely busy in this fall, but
Yeah.
it happens you know, twice a week, every week for 2 hours at a time, so 4 hours total every week.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is model some of the examples that, or the main example that I use in my workshops, and just see how that
Oh yeah,
how that works out. But
that'd be fantastic. I'm more than happy, and I'm sure half the people here would really enjoy that as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to. I came to another part here. This is the part I wanted to talk about. Is this drawing this line? This actually shows you a contract at each point, what the preconditions are for each step of the way. The interesting thing about these set of diagrams here is how you can organize the swim lanes to be more human, such as actual events, such as someone walking into
so
a
are
bank.
the swim lanes the dashed lines? Are those the...
Well, they're all swim lanes, dashed or otherwise. We
Okay.
can also do, if you look at entities, I don't want to use the word aggregate, but if you're from DD, you understand
Sure.
aggregate. You
I
can
like
say that there's an
entity too.
entity or something that can have its own swim lane. You can have heavier lines to separate entire subdomains, bounded contexts, and all those concepts or
Yeah.
subsystems. But inside, you can also have, you know, one swim lane for product A, one swim lane from product B, and this little range of this is something we've started using more recently, which is the actual events, such as someone entering a bank physically, can be put at the top near the UI, so that we get the real sort of UX UI feel as to like, oh yeah, I'm at the bank, so most likely I'm just on my phone, or I'm at home doing my taxes, so I'm usually in front of the computer, so that's where I can see, you know, a larger screen, and I can probably look at a more detailed report than on a phone. So you can have those UX UI concerns kind of addressed at this level, yet the actual business events and other actual information is in the middle. And if we have and if can someone mute? Sorry, someone's been muting.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. If that's...
So taxes. I was late on my taxes.
Can someone
because
mute?
I was in Venezuela and whatever. They sent me a few letters.
I'm not a co-host, so I can't do any muting.
Who's the co-host? Okay, there, it's finished.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. So back to this, we have so basically the middle is the core of event modeling, is where you have your business events and some integration events where you may look at what happened in the payment system and things like that. The more technical stuff is something that we've added more recently, and the place where you would use that, and I use this example, is for example is like a Ticketmaster, where you know, at 10 a.m. on Saturday you have a system that must support, you know, 10,000 users hitting F5 yeah, so that's kind of where we can dive in and notice that there's hardly anything happening with the actual information, but there's some things such as you know, a streams index where we have a pending stream that you want to create, and maybe this is how Event Store works underneath. And the reason I want to show this is because our business is so tied to a piece of infrastructure working correctly that it makes sense to at least have a place to discuss that, even if we have to hide these two lower swim lanes when we're just talking about the business. And this idea of showing, expanding and hiding swim lanes is one of those navigation things that we're adding to ONote and all of that. So I hope that kind of gives you another idea of how you can, you know, use this to start to grade and organize the events in this sort of horizontal or vertical space. So
yeah, very good, very good.
So, I mean, if you want, we're doing a workshop this Thursday, Friday. It's going to be at 6 a.m. our time. There's still places left, but it would be really good if you wanted to see a full workshop of what we do from beginning to end, because in the 2 days that we do, it's not full days. It's like a 4 hour and a 4 hour, 4 hours on a Thursday, 4 hours on a Friday. And what we do is we take an example domain. We teach people how to run the workshop as well, and how it's slightly different. It's really similar to event storming in terms of the mechanics of how you run the arrangement of people, but the artifacts are quite different. They're much more simple. We don't have decisions. We don't use the yellow stickies for users and things like that. So you can see the mechanics are quite different. So we can go through all of that. We could use your domain if you want, your example domain. We're going to use one for a hotel system as well. And then what we do on the second day is implement a proper cloud infrastructure deployment of that solution, so that people know from the entire software development lifecycle, from event modeling all the way through to deployment in the cloud and maintenance and management of that solution. So there's still some, like, if anyone else wants to go, there's still some spots left. And if you're either unemployed, if you're a student, make sure you talk to me to get a discount or get free admission if you're really strapped. It's been a hard year, so we're happy to invite you to learn. And actually, maybe I just should
Can
show
you
where
give me
that
the
is.
link? I need to check
let me
my
just,
calendar.
So it's on our site. If you just go to workshops down here, there's the dates that I'm talking about is the December dates. And so we have, I didn't add the exact dates, so I have to update the site. But it's Thursday, Friday this week, and then we have January and February. But there's still room for that. So if you want to, you said you didn't have, you had a clear schedule, so you're more than welcome to drop by on Thursday, and I'm sure people will be super happy to see you there. And actually to have someone with so much experience from domain-driven design to go in and try their hand at this. Bobby Collarwood's going to be there. He's the guy that wrote and invented ONote. I should show you that as well, because that's really important. That's one of the most important pieces of tooling that gives you the opinions that I talked about into being able to build a system like this. So joining, the projections to the actual UIs, having all of this done, and then also being able to plug in a code generator, or templates. So if you're doing login again, you can just drag a whole workflow that takes care of login, and you have the right events exposed, so you can do the integration, deterministically, knowing exactly how those pre-built pieces in your solution are going to fit into the rest of the system.
Yeah,
so
if you can paste the URL, I would.
Yeah, I'm going to put that in.
I just need to check my calendar.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
The other thing oh, sorry.
No problem. If you just put workshops, I think that'll work. I think it's workshops, not workshop. Yeah, I think it's workshop. Okay, I'm just copy that one. And so that's to everyone here. So yeah, it would be wonderful to have you there. Even if you can't stay for the whole thing, at least you can see, spend an hour and just see the mechanics. Believe it or not, our Polish. I have a funny story for you, since you are surrounded by Polish people somehow.
Well, my sister married into a Polish family. So.
Right. So, I mean, we're like most other Polish families in Canada. We emigrated during, the Cold War in the early 80s, escaping the uprisings and all this other stuff that happened, and the protests. And it wasn't a very safe place to raise a family. So we made it here in 1983. And I haven't been back because I had a stack of letters from the military calling me back for service. Now that whole thing's done. So I was able to go back to Poland after 36 years. Haven't seen my cousins in 37 years. And so last year was the first time that I was back to see my cousins. It was incredible. And it's thanks to Rafael, who's actually here. It's our Polish office.
Hello.
That we have there. And thanks to him, we did a whole tour of event modeling, like 3 cities. And I kid you not, when I met him the first time, he said to come by again and talk, and we did some work together. And I was writing up the contract, and I just about fell out of my chair because when I asked him for the address, it's the street where I grew up on. And I'm not kidding you. And it's not like in the main part of the city. It's like in the suburbs, like the sticks. I mean, this can't be right. They must have put another street of the same name somewhere in Warsaw. This is absolutely insane. So, my hairs on my arm are standing as I'm reading the address and signing these contracts with Rafael. And sure enough, eventually I went and did a few workshops and visited and worked on some projects together, and visited the office. And it is the same street. I walked to, when I was 8 years old or 9 years old when we left, to the same building where I grew up, walked to the same school. It's still there, all walking distance. You could practically see the building where I grew up on from the offices. It's a new little complex across the street that got built much later, I guess in the 2000s or whatever. And Rafael was had his office for his team right there on that same street. So 37 years later, I'm walking the same streets. It's just crazy. So actually, there's something in the water, because they're doing CQRS and event sourcing, and there's very few companies in Poland that are doing that. And the guy I bump into is literally working where I grew up. So something in the water. That's what I blame it on.
My mother-in-law was born in what is now Poland. It was in old Germany, right?
Oh yeah.
And it was called Nasowitz Posen, I think.
Poznan?
Well, I think it's called Poznan now. I think the German word was Posen. But
I have family from there too on my dad's side.
And guess what? Tomasz Jaskula was born and raised one town over from that.
Oh,
yeah. So yeah, it's a lot of small world.
It is a small world, but yeah, my father's side, a lot of his family is exactly from that. So he's got some German heritage because the borders changed. And my mother's more of the south of Poland, but interesting background.
Yeah.
So, but,
well, the problem is I can just talk like this because I like just visiting with people, and so I don't want to interrupt the session. But maybe I'll suggest that I can look into attending the workshop if I
please do if you can. I mean, we'd be honored to have you. That'd be wonderful. And likewise, I want to attend yours in January, so I'll be definitely there and do that in kind. And so if you have the time this Thursday and Friday, I think that'll be fantastic to after we got this out of the way and the introductions of all this, to really show those concepts at work would be really key.
I think I would rather, by the way, in your workshop, I would rather use the examples that you're used to using.
Sure.
And then I can map what I do in those terms So
yeah, our example domain's fairly easy. I've been beating it to death for a while now. It's the hotel automation, so it's something that someone is very familiar with. If you've traveled anywhere, you know the mechanics of booking hotels and things like that and how they work. So it's a nice, easy way to dip your feet into thinking about modeling, thinking about information systems and specifying them and finding exceptions and doing all those things. So I think it's really good. But I think we have about half an hour left. Maybe we can have some questions from people. I'm going to check because I know I wanted to keep it really open to you, and unless you want to have any other specific questions.
Well, I wanted to ask about the Teutonic guys. Were they doing something for event modeling tooling, or they were doing something for?
They were doing. They're doing a tool called Lester, which was a DSL for typing up. Kind of command handlers and events, and it wasn't really focused on the UI. It was more of an open source project with kind of a back end for I'm not sure, I forget the business model, but it was something more on a DSL level of typing that. ONote is more on the UX UI perspective, being able to look at the system holistically, and like you said, that minutia of those templates for the UI might be distracting. So you need a lot of automation and help there, so it actually can be moved out of the way quickly.
Mhm.
And it doesn't become a distraction, but yet you did it, and you made people that are visual happy. Because when you look at a wall of sticky notes, the people that are visual, it's not helping them, right? They want to see, what is the user seeing? What is the experience? That's going to talk to them more. So both sides are equally important. And that's why I made event modeling to be both visual and analytical. And those are very key components, so that you're as inclusive as possible. And you have to explain as few things as possible. When someone goes up to the blueprint for your system, they say, oh, I get it. That person sees the receipt here. Okay, I understand. Their goal is to have purchased something, and I can see how that they got to that point. So it really is a storybook. A lot of times I say it's like a storyboard for a movie. You have keyframes, you have the visuals, you know what the scene's like, you know what the feeling is, you know what people are experiencing. At the bottom, you have the plot. You have to understand that the movie makes sense, or people are just gonna not like it because the movie doesn't make sense. It's not enough to have pretty pictures. We've all seen Hollywood flops that are shot beautifully with magnificent landscapes, but they just bomb at the box office because the plot sucks. And vice versa, right? There may be some really good stories, but the characters are badly picked, and the scenes are, they didn't shoot it right, and it's not appealing. So both sides are kind of key. And I think the UX, UI, and the design people need to be as important in any organization, to make sure that that customer-centric feeling is always communicated, that we are thinking of the end user, that we see and feel what they're going to see and feel, and that it's tied together to reality as well. We're not just like getting a design shop to go nuts and then make things that are just going to be difficult to implement and all those things, right? And then we're going to have a bunch of back and forth, and that's not going to be fun. So let's just try and make something that has a collaborative kind of canvas to discuss those things, and where we have the largest overlaps to those different disciplines. And that's going to reduce the amount of tooling, et cetera. Like some people say, well, this is yet another tool for your tool belt. Yeah, but it's like a Swiss Army knife. We want it to be like a Swiss Army knife, so that you don't have to be carrying a really large tool belt that's heavy and it's going to make you slow. Nor do you want to have a ton of super experienced people in a lot of places. So, and looking at information is kind of like one of the core things that helps do that. And a lot of the information is tied to the visual representation of it. And so this is, that's really important, the UX UI part of it. So I hope that kind of answers your question as to where O-Note's coming from, where other automation things have come from, et cetera. So yeah, O-Note is definitely a long journey to get to, where the rational unified process and all the other case tools went off. But I think by ignoring the how in the middle, we're going to be able to accomplish that to a much greater extent by focusing on state. And state over time, right? We had a ton of entity relationship type of diagramming tools, and there's millions of them. And they stopped at that point because we didn't have that history. We didn't have that over time kind of cadence to it. This is how the information changes over time.
Interesting. O-Note is that using Miro, or what is?
No, it's from the scratch. Is Bobby in here? Bobby should have joined us. Oh, yeah, hi, Bobby. Well, why am I talking?
You were doing a great job. I didn't want to interrupt your flow.
Bobby surprised me by this. I did not know about O-Note until Bobby sprung it upon me when it was already like half developed. I'm like, what? You did this on your own? I was pleasantly surprised, because that actually showed me how large event modeling had become, that there's people all over the world that are using it, and it's helping them to translate their ideas and their general models and their businesses into actual solutions with some cadence, some predictability, and again, that really large ability to communicate to a large subset of different disciplines, eliminating a lot of silos, which is a big win. So
yeah. So on that, we developed O-Note from scratch as a browser-based tool. We do have collaboration that we're slowly rolling out to larger and larger groups. That should be finished soon. But yeah, we do have real-time collaboration as well. The goal for kind of Q1 of 2021 is code generation. So we do plan to have some level of code generation. I say code maybe in scare quotes. It may be more something like Open API Swagger or gRPC or GraphQL or Async API or things like that. These intermediate representations that have good code gen tool chains already in existence for the various languages. So generating specifications from specifications, right, allows us to define the web services layer, allows us to define the recording of these events via Async API and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what we're targeting for Q1 of 2021. Between now and then, we've got to do a few other things. We've got to do a schema system so that we can define the data elements and be able to sort of track them and identify sufficiency and completeness and all of that. And then we also have a repository service, very much like GitHub, but for event models, so that teams can share models, have them versioned over time, introduce pull requests to change the model in an incremental way, but then also have webhooks and things to integrate with CI/CD pipelines and code generators and all that. So that's kind of our roadmap over the next little while. And I can expand on that more both at Adam's workshop, and then we also have a webinar coming up in January where we're going to talk about our roadmap for 2021.
Is it a paid thing? Is it open source? What's the model?
So it's a sort of a freemium model. It's built on an open data standard that we're working on with Adam to define an event model as data, as JSON data. So that's kind of the core of the guts of how it works, and that will be an open standard. But the product itself is like a SaaS thing. It's got a free user tier, but then to get some of the more advanced functionality that I just described, initiating a collaboration session, generating code, checking in models to the cloud, and all that stuff, that will be paid functionality. But just the editor itself and the ability to join someone else's collaboration session is all free.
Does it round trip? I mean, when you generate source code, are you planning on round trip engineering or
I don't know.
Only, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably forward only, and then relying on version control to sort of allow for that sort of fidelity. Round tripping, I thought was always sort of a false promise of UML, but we can debate about that later.
Well, I just wondered. I mean, it's just yeah, interesting. Hopefully we can talk. So you're going to be in the workshop?
Yep.
Yeah, on Thursday. I cannot make it on Friday, but yes, on Thursday, I have a small session, I think, or a little lightning talk or something where I'll talk about ONode a little bit.
Cool.
Yeah, it's important to make sure people see the future of when they start. A lot of people have invested in event modeling now. As you can see, this entire ONode project was done unbeknownst to me. So there's an entire community out there that's independent of me that started to do things, and so now I have a lot of work to make sure that these efforts continue to be true to those fundamental principles. Small number of patterns, small number of elements, easy to teach. I want to be able to say 15 minutes, like win a hackathon by using event modeling. It means explain what event modeling is in 15 minutes. Do the event modeling in the next 45 minutes, then start the work so that in the next 3 hours, you're finished ahead of everyone else. That's the wins that you get out of event modeling. It's when you can take people that are completely strangers to one another and herd those cats into making software. And the slice approach is incredible for that. I mean, it is so powerful that you have context for your contracts on a timeline. It really spells out, before I do this command handler, what can I expect in the event stream to have existed, right? Or what do I expect, in terms of these read models to have? And then after I'm done my slice, what am I ensuring for the slices that come after me? Which ones do I connect to? I can answer that and I can finish that. So during something as strenuous and hard to do as a hackathon, it just shines, which I think when we put practices in these incredibly high pressure situations where only the best things survive, that's when I get that feedback. It's like, oh, this actually helped people this wasn't a burden for them to have to learn extra things. And oh, we failed at the hackathon because we spent half of the time learning Adam's crazy idea. Right? And I don't want that. We spent the first 15 minutes talking about information systems and kind of how they work. And Adam gave us a great insight as to how to do it. And then we did it and prepped ourselves for the next 45 minutes. And then the next 3 hours zoomed right along. And we were, 5 places ahead of any other team in that hackathon. That's the stuff I see happening. And that's what keeps me going.
Cool. Well, I need to drop off, but
okay.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I saw several people that I know from Europe and maybe elsewhere. So it was nice seeing everybody.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to finally connect, and hopefully this was insightful a little bit and kind of gave you a background as to why this thing happened.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can join Thursday and Friday. So let me just confirm that. And all right, cool.
Okay, well, we'll reconnect then on online, and I'll send you the links and everything else, and we'll see you on Thursday. And
okay.
Thank you again. That's wonderful.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it. So it'll be exciting.
Okay.
And then January too. Don't forget about finding
absolutely.
me at your workshop.
Okay, we'll talk.
All right.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Vaughn.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. We'll get to other questions probably next week because of the workshop. So have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.
Adam, again. What time of day was the workshop?
6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Thursday.
6 a.m. for 4 hours?
For 4 hours, yeah. And then Friday, 6 a.m., 4 hours. So it should be good for Europe, should be good for North America. It'll be extra special this time around. So I hope to see people there.
Cool.
Cheers.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you, the ones that are coming to the workshop, see you Thursday. For those that want to do a follow-up, next one is Tuesday. So we'll definitely have a Tuesday one to, well, actually, we might have a Friday one because the workshop will be done by then. So it'll be 6 till 10. So 10:30. Yeah, we're going to have a little party after the workshop on Friday. So Friday meetup is happening. We're going to try to make it a little bit more fun and rejoin all the people that are part of the workshop to kind of have a retrospective as to what they learned and all those things. So anyway, I hope to see whoever's going to be at the workshop. There's still places left, so don't delay, and let me know if you're a student or anything else like that. I will make sure that you can get there and that money's not a problem. Okay, thank you, everyone. See you Thursday or Friday or both. Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks.